Hello and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. It's Lois here, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted this loose watercolour landscape. I tried for an evening feel to this with rain clouds on the way and a little bit of last light in the sky as the sun sinks below the tree line. I've tried to keep the trees really loose with some sort of boggy ground like marshland in the foreground. I'm going to paint the sky using the wet in wet method, and for most of the painting I'm just going to use one large brush. And just before I start, I've got time for a quick plug for my book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Techniques and Tutorials for the Complete Beginner. It's available to purchase from all good bookstores online, and I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested in taking a closer look. And now let's get on to the demo. You can see that I've just roughly drawn in a tree line and just a few lines to help me keep the foreground oriented nice and flat. And I'm using my Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch modeler to wet the sky. I'm wetting most of the sky, but I am leaving a few dry patches here and there. This will help me to get some soft and some hard edges as I paint the sky wet in wet. So I'm going to use raw sienna, burnt sienna, and then Payne's grey and indigo and a water misting spray, and then I shall tip and tilt the board to get the washes to flow until I get a sky that I like. That's just about it for my sky. I've laid my board flat so the washes don't run anymore. And now I've dipped into my tube consistency paint, adding just a tiny bit of water to loosen the paint up. This is raw umber, burnt umber and Payne's grey. And I'm using this nice rich paint to paint into the wet sky to create a tree line that will softly diffuse, but the paint is rich enough and dry enough to hold its own and to stay where I put it. And that will create my tree line. And then I can dip into raw umber and sap green and begin to paint in the marshy foreground. And while the paint is nice and wet, I'm using my palette knife and I'm drawing with the palette knife, scraping sort of fairly gently through the rich paint back to the white of the paper to drag out some trunks and branches as if the last sunlight was just catching them. If you prefer not to do this, and it's a technique that I really enjoy, but not everybody likes this effect. If you prefer not to do this, it's best to wait for the tree line to dry, and then use a rigger brush or some other small brush with a good point to paint in your tree trunks and branches. Now I've noticed that I've got a bit of water pooling up on my sky, and it started to dry and leave a bit of a strange mark there. So I've turned the board around. You can see the paint and water flowing. Once it's flowed down a little bit further over that area, then I'll use a paintbrush to drag the paint across the tape. See if I can even out the moisture on that part of the painting. If things dry unevenly, you can end up getting some sort of strange cauliflower marks. So I'm trying to avoid that, and that looks a lot better now. This is a mixture of burnt umber and raw umber, and I'm painting over the branches and the trunks that I scraped through the rich paint to create the canopies, and then going back with my palette knife to draw again through those paint marks, just to keep these really lovely loose looking trees sort of connected with variety of sort of texture and value. I've dipped into the indigo and Payne's grey now, and using the tips of the mottler brush, I'm adding some shadows into my marshland, keeping everything sort of fairly horizontal so that the land is nice and flat. And then adding some shadows to my canopies with indigo and Payne's grey. And I think that's just about done. Yep, I think I'm going to leave it here. It's loose, it's fresh, everything is suggested, but it comes together reasonably convincingly, I hope, as a very loose, simple landscape, trying not to get bogged down with detail. So removing the tape and having a look at it, and the sky looks fresh, it looks exciting, certainly looks like there's rain on the way, and I'm pleased to have been able to keep some of that raw sienna and burnt sienna across the lower part of the sky for that sunset glow, and the dry brush sparkle across the foreground keeps the scene looking really fresh and suggests the marshy ground in front of these trees. Don't worry if you try something like this and it doesn't work out first time. It can take a while to build the confidence and the skills to mix the paint to the right consistency and to be able to make these very, very loose marks, but knowing that they will soften and diffuse and end up looking like a convincing loose landscape at the end. It's all about building skills, building confidence, and of course this takes practice, but it's a lot of fun to do, and as long as you're not too hard on yourself if things don't work out, then it can be a really good way to progress and really build your skills as a loose watercolour landscape painter. If you enjoyed this or found it helpful or interesting, please click on the thumbs up button, and if you haven't subscribed to our channel, then I'd invite you to do so. It's free to do and it really does help us out. And thank you so much to everybody that supports the channel on Patreon. We really appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy loose painting. Bye.